Well, we are live. It is Friday, October 8th, 2021. Mike Bohn here, joined by my man John Morgan. Here just talk some MMA because why not on a nice Friday afternoon here, John? Early October, we got a busy month coming up of MMA. Of course, a card tomorrow afternoon. I'm all about these early cards, man. Just give me these early start times every single week. What do you think about them, like in the Pacific time zone? What time's the first fight? Like 11 a.m.?
Yeah, so we got an 11 a.m. start tomorrow, but I love it, to be honest with you. I mean, I honestly wish the UFC would do it more often. And it does seem like they are doing it a little bit more often, but I just think, this is a sport that really has no off season. It's every damn week. And you're asking people to give up their Saturday nights, basically, And look, I don't know. I think it might be a good thing. I mean, ESPN, ABC, maybe they don't have much need for programming during the day. They got a lot of college football and stuff like that right now. But to be honest with you, I like it, man. I like the fact that you can watch some fights during the day. Maybe save those late night slots for the big pay-per-view events. But we'll see. It seems like they're embracing it a little bit anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's kind of like a two-sided end of the coin with the East Coast and Pacific Coast, because when you're on the Pacific Coast, it's like your day starts earlier, but it ends earlier. But then on the East Coast, you can like spend your day actually doing something before you go in there. But I already see the people in the comments being like, "Stop complaining, guys. I'm in the UK. I have to wake up at 4 a.m. for every card." So whatever, we won't harp on this too much. No, there we go. JTM-ish. But anyways, it is a fight card tomorrow. I think that's probably the most we could say about it. We have a important strawweight main event. Obviously, Mackenzie Dern and Marina Rodriguez. This is the big one. I know we spent, and we'll obviously get to Mackenzie Dern, but on Spinning Back Click earlier this week, we talked a lot about Mackenzie Dern and what this fight means to her, but let's give Marina Rodriguez some love because she obviously deserves it. Her second UFC headliner. I think she's, obviously done a really good body of work in the UFC so far. So like, what do you just kind of make of Marina Rodriguez? Obviously it's super quiet, not like going to go out there saying any crazy stuff in the interviews or the media days, but she seems to be coming along pretty damn well as a fighter.
Yeah, no question about it. Impressive career record. You got a couple draws that kind of set it back from being a perfect record. But overall, she's accomplished some great things. I think she's continuing to get better as a fighter. She's an exciting fighter. She comes out, she's looking to strike. And I think that's what most fans like, right? I mean, I know there's an appreciation for the grappling game that we all have. But at the end of the day, the casual fan, they just want to see people go out there and stand and bang, right? Marina's going to do that every time. So, this is an important matchup. As you said, the star power, I guess, in this matchup is Mackenzie Dern. She's the one with the hype around her and the expectations and all those. But, Marina can really come in here and steal some of that here. So I do like this matchup. As you said, I see a lot of people looking at this card saying, oh, I'm not too excited by it. I get it, but this main event really is intriguing because it's meaningful. There's real impact in the division in terms of the rankings, but the style is very intriguing too. I mean, this is the closest you're going to get to old school, striker versus grappler matchup, early days of the UFC. And I think the great thing was that both women didn't try to mask that. When we talked to them in media today, they were like, Mackenzie and Marina both were like, yeah, listen, I know what my game is. I know what her game is. There's no hiding it. We know what we're trying to do here. So listen, it's going to all come down to whether or not Mackenzie Dern can get past that jab, get past the movement, and get the fight to the ground. Because if she can't, she's forced to stand. Yes, Mackenzie is getting better in the stand-up department, but I wouldn't favor her. If you tell me, hey, John, I promise you this fight is going to be a 25-minute stand-up affair, I wouldn't like Mackenzie's chances there very much. So intriguing clash, and it's got some stakes on it. Not necessarily a number one contender fight. You got Carla Esparza right there kind of hanging out, waiting on that opportunity, but a meaningful fight in the division nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I know you almost like tried to goad Mackenzie into it at the media day, being like, oh, you're really striking's really coming along. Like, would you go out there and stand with her? But she seems to be in that place, at least right now, that's, you always see it with like the wrestlers who come in like, oh, I've been working on my hands, but now I'm not going to take anyone down. Like Johnny Hendricks comes to mind or something because he gets like one knockout. But she seems to be smart enough about the game and have like the right coaches that she's not going to go in there ever not trying to take someone down. But she's going to be forced to, have to stand there and strike at some points. Like I actually saw a stat that's saying, if you could guess right now, John, what do you think Mackenzie Dern's takedown accuracy is in the UFC?
Ooh,
what percentage of her takedown
accuracy
she gets?
I think about her more as a scrambling opportunistic. So I would say probably not incredibly high, maybe in the 40% range.
It's in the 10% range.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So, I mean, she's one that will go out there, and obviously that means a high volume of attempts. So, for her, I mean, like, she's going to go out there and obviously have to strike and do all that stuff. So, I'm pretty curious. But you mentioned the title picture, and I think that's where this gets really, really interesting because You mentioned Carla Esparza. I have big fears for her if something spectacular happens here, especially for Mackenzie Dern. Obviously, she has the head-to-head win over Rodriguez, the only person to beat her, so that plays in her favor. But really, the scenarios I see playing out here are if Mackenzie does something amazing, maybe she goes next. But what happens if Zhang Wiley beats Rose Namajunas? Do you think they go and do the what they're doing at flyweight right now, the 3 straight title fights against the same opponent? It's tricky.
I mean, I guess you got to see how the fight plays out, right? Because that's always part of it too, not just the result, but actually how the fight goes. But yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing, to be honest with you. I mean, it's clear that the UFC likes that matchup, right? I mean, they went with the rematch right away when they didn't necessarily have to. You know, you had Carla Esparza hanging out there that would have taken the fight. But I think they think it's, you know, it's a more marketable fight, you know, and obviously, you know, it doesn't hurt for Zhang Wiley, you know, a Chinese fighter that, you know, kind of helps open that market. So to give her those championship opportunities, you know, you kind of understand why they went with the rematch. And if this is such a big rivalry, you kind of understand why they would go right to the trilogy as well. So we'll see. We'll see. There's definitely nothing guaranteed. I mean, I don't think you can blame Carla Esparza for at least saying, like, you know what, let me wait and see. Let me see what's going on. Let me see what happens. And then if they do go straight to the trilogy, then maybe I'll take a number 1 contender fight. At that time, I would advise her to take a number 1 contender fight, because I also don't think you want to go into a UFC title opportunity, you know, on a very lengthy layoff. I think you want to keep sharp. So we'll see what happens. There's definitely, I don't think anything's guaranteed at this point, but, you know, if you're that close to a title shot and you've worked to get there, I don't blame Carla for at least, you know, hanging out and waiting to see what happens at UFC 268 and then maybe making her decision from there.
Yeah, it's so soon. Like, obviously, you know, it's like a month away at this point. So why not just sit around and wait? But to me, like, them booking that rematch was kind of a miss, just because look at the card that it's on. Like, if you were ever going to throw a Carla Esparza title fight, which we know isn't going to be the one selling the pay-per-views, throw it on a card in New York with 3 title fights on it. Like, that, it's going to sell regardless. People are going to be tuning in. So it's not like you needed to save, you know, a pay-per-view by having Rose headline or something. So to me, it just would have been the smart move to do it then. But as we talked about, I think, like, directly after that event in Jacksonville, when we did like that matchmaker video, I had a feeling it was going to be Zhang Wiley all along, just from what Dana was saying and just the way the fight went. So pretty interesting. But Mackenzie Dern can obviously shake things up in there if she can go do something amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. I am curious, since you were at the weigh-ins and I saw someone comment on it, what did you make of this whole Chris Curtis in, Chris Curtis out, James Krause apparently trying to get the fight on like 20 hours notice? Just tell me what it was like being in that room, and I guess just seeing all the chaos and, you know, this fight's happening, not happening, this person's in, this person wants to be in.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, because you're even seeing like UFC staffers getting texts and emails and stuff like as it's all unfolding right there in front of us. So it was a bit wild. You know, I don't know how close James Krause was to really getting that fight, but props to him for even saying, yeah, I'll take it. I'll step up on no notice whatsoever and do it. It's interesting, you know, because I think on the one hand, a lot of people were happy for Chris Curtis, right? I mean, a guy that's been in the game for a long time that hung it up briefly, you know, and is still grinding away and got some wins and gets this invite, you know, and boy, he was absolutely beaming. If you watch him, you know, the whole time he's walking up to the scale, he's like, well, it's about 10 years too late, but I'm here, you know what I mean? I'm finally here. You could just sense his enthusiasm to be here. And then the matchup falls apart. And, you know, it's interesting, right? Because Phil Hawes has every right to turn down that fight. You know what I mean? It's not his fault that his opponent, you know, was injured or was not able to make weight. You know, don't know exactly if you saw what the nature of it was. I was concerned maybe it was some lingering issues with that rib injury that he had earlier this year. I thought it was a pretty quick turnaround from an injury like that. But nevertheless, the fact that Deron Wynn couldn't compete, you know, Phil Hawes doesn't need to feel obligated to take a fight on no notice whatsoever, especially when you think about, you know, Phil Hawes' path to where he is right now, right? You think about, you know, been tabbed as this uber prospect forever, and it seems like he would get to these moments and he would lose and he would fall back and everything would reset again, you know, and I often wondered, is he ever going to get here? And now he's got a little bit of momentum going, and if he doesn't feel mentally right about it, you know, you got to feel good about what you're doing. So I understand Phil Hawes. At the same time, you can't think that the UFC matchmakers are feeling too good about that, you know, saying, hey, we brought this guy in, we found a solution for you, and now you're turning it down, you know, here at the last minute, you're costing us a fight. You know, what do they do with Chris Curtis from here? You know, hopefully they still give him a fight, but I don't know they're necessarily obligated to give him one at this point if they didn't intend to have him here. Now it's COVID time, so, you know, they need about as many bodies as they can get on the roster to be ready for stuff. So just a very, very unique scenario, and it's one in which I completely understand where Phil Hawes is coming from. But I think he's also going to have to realize that he probably didn't do himself a lot of favors in the eyes of the matchmakers either. So, you know, we'll see what they do with him moving forward. It's weird because you can really see both sides of the decision and understand why the decision was made. But I think sometimes fans are just quick to be like, dude, you fight anybody. We throw you in there and you fight. That's what you do. You're a fighter. And you got to feel right about it. And like I said, he's had a couple stumbles in his career, and I think maybe he was trying to make sure, he didn't make one here.
Yeah, I can't hate on him too hard. I mean, especially dude, Deron Winn is like such a unique body style and fighting style that like he's not a guy that you can be like, oh, well, I'm still like fighting a guy who's similar to him. Like he's kind of unique all on itself. So I can understand the extreme short notice of this just being like, whatever, let's just try to reschedule it or give me a full camp for someone else. But yeah, I think he gets a tough fight, the next one, Phil Hawes. But hey, that could be good for him regardless. But maybe he fights one of those people who has the last name ending in OV or something like that. We shall see. But yeah, anything else on this card that's like jumping out to you? I mean, I think it's kind of just, we had a weight miss in the co-main event. There's some like interesting matchups there, but I don't think anything with like massive title picture relevance. Maybe the Tim Elliott and Nicolau fight, you could say, has some meaning at 125.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's definitely no number one contenders being crowned out of any fights on here, outside of the main event, other than, as you said, Tim Elliott, Mateus Nicolau. I mean, that's obviously a meaningful fight at flyweight, but it's not going to make a number one contender fight. So in terms of immediate rankings, that's the one that stands out. But I really do think we're going to have some fun with this card. I mean, you look at Randy Brown and Jared Gooden. I mean, on paper, they look like they should be an exciting matchup. So that should be fun. Maria Agapova, Sabina Mazo could be absolute fireworks as well. We don't know what to expect out of Agapova at this point. She was kind of the next big thing for a second, and then she suffered the big upset. But she says she's completely revamped everything about her life and her career, and she can be very exciting. I'm excited to see Alexander Romanov again. I believe that he's a guy that does have a big upside in his potential as well. So that's one to look out for. Damon Jackson, Charles Rosa on paper looks like it could be very, very exciting. We're not even talking about Kolaris and Gutierrez. So, I mean, when you look at the matchups, I mean, if you're a fight fan and you follow the fights, you're a hardcore and you see these matchups, you see the potential for some fun and some excitement. But it's just not going to be ones where we go, okay, cool. Now we know what the next title fight is at 170, or now we know what, the next number one contender fight. It's not going to be that kind of card where we really move the divisions forward. But, listen, it's 9 fights, so it's not like anybody's asking you to sit there for 6.5 hours and watch it. I mean, it's going to be a much faster paced fight. And it's going to be fun. And like we said, it's kind of an early one, so you can still go out and do what you want to do on Saturday night and have some plans on Saturday night. So for me, why not tune in? I think it's going to be a fun fight card, even if it doesn't necessarily have, immediate impact in the rankings in every division.
Yeah, and like you said, it'll wrap early, and I think for most fight fans, it's a perfect table setter for Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder 3, which is going to be happening, right down the street. Obviously, we're mostly talking MMA here, but are you pretty excited for that? Like, are you going to kind of make it appointment viewing, or are you going?
No, not going, but I'll definitely watch. I'll probably just spend some time at home with the family and watch it though. But yeah, it's a big fight. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
Two of the biggest names in the sport right now, and they're going at it, and they've got history. You know what I mean? And all of those things that make it fun, the tension between them. I like Fury in the fight, to be honest with you. I just feel like he's a better boxer overall, but obviously, Wilder has the ability to finish fights. He's got that insane power. So it's fun. I'll definitely watch it. Not going. I know there's a couple of media members that are pulling double duty and covering both the UFC card and the boxing event. Godspeed to them. That's a long day at work, but I think I might just have a frosty beverage in hand and a little snack, and then maybe plop in on the couch and take it in as a fan.
Yeah, I'll be doing the same on this Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. So if there's any Canadians listening out there, happy Thanksgiving to you all. Should be a good one. But as we, kind of put that behind us, let's just talk about some other kind of random MMA news that's out there. It's been a semi-quiet week, but there's been a few things that have popped up. I'm curious to know your opinion. We talked about it on Spinning Back Click earlier this week. Should Bellator do 5-round main events on the heels of that MVP versus Lima fight? Scott Coker coming out earlier this week telling Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour that's happening starting 2022. All main events, non-title, title are going to be 5 rounds. Feels very overdue, but do you think they ultimately made the right decision here?
Well, yeah, I think the number one thing you take out of this is Scott Coker. Thank you for paying attention to the Spinning Back Click and really taking in our advice, kind of weighing it out, listening to the option, understanding us presenting exactly why it does make sense for Bellator, and then of course making that decision. So Scott, really appreciate it. I know a longtime fan of Spinning Back Click, so thanks for that. But no, listen, I do like it. I do like the 5-round main events. It just feels like there's a little something extra there. It leaves a little bit more for things to be decided, and it forces the athletes to go to a different level and handle things a little bit differently as well. There's arguments to be made against it, why it's more difficult. How are they handling the contractual situations behind the scenes? Are they going to be paying fighters more for doing a 5-round fight instead of a 3-round fight? I don't know. That remains to be seen. If I was an athlete's manager, I would be sure to be talking about that the first time my fighter is put into a 5-round main event, because, hey, I didn't sign up for this. When I signed this contract, we were doing 3-round fights. So these are things that managers and athletes need to be aware that they can ask for moving forward. But I do like it. And I like it for a couple of reasons. Like I said, I just think it allows for, longer fights, more drama, more changes in momentum, different strategies, all this. We get to see more of the fight play out. But also, if it's a non-title fight, especially if it's somebody that's kind of getting into that number one contender status and that sort of thing, that they're getting an opportunity to know what a 5-round fight feels like before they have to go and do it against a champion. And I think that can be a valuable experience to a fighter as they're making their way up the ranks. Because you think, yeah, well, we trained harder, and I'm pretty sure I know I can go. But inevitably, man, you talk to fighters after the first time they go 5 rounds, and it really is a big opportunity for them to experience exactly what it feels like and exactly, what type of energy management they have to do, what type of exertion levels they can use along the way. It's a big moment. So I like it. And, it comes on the heels of a fight that felt like it needed 2 more rounds, right? I mean, that's the way it happened in the UFC as well. There was a fight that needed 3 more. They felt like it needed 2 more rounds, and they made the change. And I think that's what happened here in Bellator as well. And obviously, of course, the discussion we had on Spinning Back Clip.
Yes, of course. I think it does put some pressure on them to make sure that all the to raise the quality of the main events too. They do the best they can. Obviously, they have their roster and dealing with COVID and travel restrictions and all that stuff as well. So they've had to do what they can. But I think it does put a little bit of pressure to be stepping it up and just make sure that, going by their rankings, you have the elite of the elite, and you're just not throwing together what we would maybe back in the day call like a Thackerville main event or something when we were going there every single weekend. But nevertheless, it kind of bleeds over into some other Bellator news there, though. Obviously, a title was put on the line, making it 5 rounds, but Patricio Pitbull vacates the lightweight belt, and then they do Patricio Pitbull versus Peter Quelly for the rematch for the title and everything. Again, to me, long overdue, this move. What Patricio's had the belt for 2 years now. When did he beat Michael Chandler? May of 2019, I think it was. So even longer than that. They had to do this, and I guess, keep it all in the family though. So do you agree with Patricio's decision to give it up then? And then do you think they made the right fight for the vacant belt?
I do. I mean, I think this is an exciting fight. Stylistically, it's going to be a lot of fun. You got a little history between the teams as well. They're having a little back and forth and going at it a bit. So I think it's the right fight to make, especially given the location, that sort of thing. But I like the fight, and I like the storyline, right? The brother stepping aside. As you said, it was a move that needed to be made. It was a move I think they always intended on making. I think maybe they were just waiting for the right time, because it felt like they were always kind of hinting at this, like, we'll figure something out, we'll get something done. I think they were always kind of moving this direction. But what a cool storyline, right? The brother stepping aside for his brother to take a shot at the belt. I mean, it's cool. This was the right fight to make, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and just hopefully this can keep some movements. I mean, you talk to the lightweights, they've been pretty frustrated with the just indirection of that division and not knowing what's coming up next and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad they finally made the decision to move forward.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that's the only, man, that's the thing with this champ status, right? That everybody's going, God bless Conor McGregor. I mean, it's, for years and years and years, I'm talking about the UFC here, but for years and years, we had UFC president Dana White saying, no, we're not going, guys, for 2 belts. And then Conor McGregor comes along, obviously changes the landscape of the sport. He was allowed to do it. It was an iconic scene. And then it became like this thing that everybody wanted to accomplish. But the problem is, I mean, you just can't stay as active as you'd like at the highest level of the sport in 2 divisions. It's just impossible to do, no matter how good you are. And inevitably, that kind of slows down the division. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't be going for champ status. I mean, it's a heck of an accomplishment. But for me, I don't know, man. I don't like seeing it as often as it seems like we have people trying to do it these days, because it just never gets defended in both divisions. It can't be. I would rather, champions, instead of focus on, hey, man, I won it in 2 weight classes, do the thing where it's like, hey, I dominated my division for 10 years. How about that? I beat everybody that came along. That, to me, honestly, dominating a division for a decade, that means more to me than, well, on one night, I technically was the champion of 2 different weight classes. You know what I mean? It's like, did you beat all the contenders in both those divisions? No, you didn't. So, yeah, I don't I don't want to rail against it because it is cool, you know, the champ, one belt over each shoulder. Wow, I'm the king of 2 divisions or the queen of 2 divisions. I get it. But I just feel like inevitably it slows things down in the weight class. And really, to me, it doesn't show dominance the way that, you know, lengthy duration at the top does.
Yeah, really? Like, has it worked out once? I mean, I guess Amanda Nunes is the best example of it, but it's like one of her
Is it?
divisions isn't really even a division. I mean, I would have been interested to see where Henry Cejudo could have gone if he didn't retire. And obviously, you know, he gave up the flyweight belt before that and stuff, but like he seemed really on top of the game and he seemed maybe someone who would be poised to do it in that sense. So yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that he retired when he did, but like there's no perfect circumstance of it happening. And yeah, it's pretty much been like a disaster every time. And look, to your point, what you just said there, like if we're talking about, you know, I don't know how everyone's GOAT list looks, but I assume to some degree it's George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, John Jones, you know, maybe Fedor, people like that. Are any of those people champs? Like obviously GSP came back and moved up and won the second belt, but he never did it simultaneously. So like, is it really putting your legacy over the top in a lot of these ways? I do agree that the sustained title defenses, sustained dominance is really what kind of makes the difference in these scenarios.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And you made a really astute point there. I was just going to make a dumb joke about Cejudo being a comedian now. So he's now C4. That's all I was really trying to wedge in there. So, you know, he retired so that he could be on top of an entire another industry, man. He's doing stand-up comedy now. So, but
how was
point,
he? You went to the show last night. What, it was Cejudo, it was Chael Sonnen, and who else? Dean Thomas?
Dean Thomas. Yeah, Dean Thomas as well. What I didn't know going there, and it got taped for Fight Pass, so you guys are going to eventually get to see it, but it was Henry Cejudo's first ever set doing stand-up. I'm like, what? You didn't like practice this at all? You didn't do like any of these? He's like, no, I'm just going at it. And he actually did pretty damn good, man. I actually, you know, I don't know how much they'll show or how much they'll admit, but he was nervous, man. He was nervous before it. And he went up there and delivered. So it was a fun night last night. It really was. I look forward to it being on Fight Pass.
Okay, yeah, I don't want you to spoil it for those people, but can you give us like a sense, like what is Henry Cejudo's humor style? Like, John, I know you like a good dick joke, and you know we have immature personalities here. So, like, is he in tone with maybe your style of comedy, or does he have his own thing going on?
No, he has his own thing, man. He was really kind of sharing his story and talking about his history and kind of the things he's been through, but also then taking a couple shots at some contenders in the division right now, and definitely so, you know, it was more about him, but also taking some shots at some of the guys in his division as well. So it was fun. He had a couple little immature jokes. You're right, man. I'm forever going to be like 10 years old mentally, so they things crack me up. Yeah, he had a couple funny ones in there, but it was good. It was fun, man. I think people enjoy it.
That's hilarious. Well, as we are talking about Henry Cejudo, I might as well make it a perfect segue. What do you think? Like, he's talking about the comeback. He's doing all these interviews. Dana White got asked about it at Contender Series. He really wants to fight Alexander Volkanovski. He wants to make history. First guy to have 3 belts in 3 different divisions, which would be, you know, a incredible feat. On paper, I think it's really fascinating. You know, what would Alexander Volkanovski do against someone who's smaller than him, you know, height-wise, things like that. That would, I'm sure, be completely opposite of what he's experienced his entire career, especially fighting the likes of Max Holloway and Brian Ortega and stuff. So I think there's some fascinating elements to that matchup, but for whatever reason, like, I think Dana maybe holds some ill will the way Henry retired, you know, the first show back from the pandemic, such a big stage, you know, pieces out with the belts, and then he's still out there nagging about this fight and that fight every few days and things like that. It hasn't really felt like the true retirement. He hasn't really, as he said, I want to make the people miss me, and I don't think he's ever really given us that chance yet. So, like, what do you think? If you could put maybe a percentage on it or odds, like, do you think there's any way this fight happens?
I mean, if I was going to put some odds on it, it'd be pretty low. I mean, you got the feeling from UFC President Dana White the other night when he was asked about it in the press conference, and he kind of laid out there to the reporter, like, well, do you think I should do it? Do you think I mean, it was just kind of a funny moment, but he certainly, you know, it would have been a moment for Dana to be like, yeah, it's something we might consider. We'll talk. There was none of that, you know, and it's never been that, right? Like, anytime Henry Cejudo's name is brought up, what does Dana do? Cejudo's retired. Cejudo's retired. Cejudo's retired. It's just kind of like Dana's nice way of saying, like, don't bother me about that guy. I don't want to talk about him right now. So I don't feel great about it. And I think, honestly, it just kind of boils down to a situation where whether it be any kind of, you know, dislike for how things were handled, I think it's more about what would happen moving forward, right? Like, so we've invested all this time and energy in Alexander Volkanovski. We've put on these fights. He has the fights with Max Holloway. For whatever reason, people don't seem to still buy into him as champion. I would say likely just because those fights were so close, plus the fact that everybody loves Max Holloway. He's a fan favorite. So for whatever reason, it just didn't seem like people wanted to buy into Alexander Volkanovski as his UFC champion. Then he goes out and has this phenomenal performance against Brian Ortega, is pushed, is tested, battles his way through it, gets the win, and it feels like people are starting to come around and say, okay, we like this Volkanovski guy. We got something here. I like this. And, there's a potential rematch with Holloway. I mean, there's a lot of history now in the division that you can set up future matchups. And then what happens if Cejudo comes in here, beats him, and then pulls a GSP and is like, I was just kidding, man. I'm out. Hope you enjoyed that fight. Bye. See you again in 5 years. And I think that's probably more what Dana is a little bit concerned about, because when you do that, when you walk away and you leave the belt behind, it takes away the meaning of that belt. Look at the situation that we're dealing with the lightweight right now, right? I mean, you got Charles Oliveira reigning as champion, but I think most people, like, if you ask the casual fan who is the lightweight champ of the UFC, they'd probably tell you Dustin Poirier. You know what I mean? I feel like people are saying he's the guy right now. So, we saw that situation in middleweight when George St. Pierre did step away. So I think, to me, and maybe I'm reading the situation wrong, but I think to me that's probably more the concern. It's like, so what? I'm going to bring Cejudo back, write him a check so he can add to his legacy, and then what? What does that do for us? What does that do? What does that do for the UFC? Yeah, it gives you one night that should be good. I don't know how much that would actually sell. Now, me personally, John Morgan, sign me up for that fight. I'm in. I would love to see Henry Cejudo come back, challenge, as you said, go for this history-making performance, give Alexander Volkanovski a big test and a signature win if Volkanovski can get it. So for me, I like it. Now, does that sell 1 million pay-per-views? I don't know. So I think that's what you got to see. I think Dana is always thinking about the business side of things. And I think he probably fails to see where the long-term upside is in that for the UFC. So I think it's low that it happens. But, listen, Cejudo is never afraid to challenge himself, and obviously his manager Ali Abdelaziz is no stranger to doing business with the UFC. And if there's anybody that can get it done, it's him. Whether or not they do, I struggle to see it coming together.
Yeah, I agree with you. They got burned bad by GSP, and I think that's what you said. A lot of things that play into that for sure. They don't want to have that happen again. You'd need insurances that he's going to fight Holloway or do whatever they need to do, and you still can't guarantee it because you can't. As Dana White has said 1 million times, you can't make these guys fight if they don't want to fight. So that's kind of the reality of the situation. A few last things here, since we're on the topic of featherweights. Yourself and our man Nolan King broke a big main event earlier today, the first main event of 2022 on the books. Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chakadze. Huge fight. Do you think this is the right fight, though, for Calvin Kattar to come back to? I mean, I'm super glad that he took a full year off, and it's going to be almost a full year to the day from the Max Holloway beatdown. That was rough to watch from cage side. We were both there in Abu Dhabi, and I'm glad he took the amount of time off, but this is a damn tall task to come back to, man. Giga has been on fire, and he's just looking unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it really is, right? It's a tough task, but that's the part of the division Calvin Kattar's in now, right? I mean, he's up there with the killers, so it's like there aren't any easy matchups. As you said, a year away, awesome, man. I love, that him and his team were both willing to accept that hey, this was not good for my long-term health, and I really need to rest up here because if I rush back, it's going to be bad for me. So I love the fact that they agreed and said, let's take this time away. And now they come back and they get, a marquee matchup. You're right. It's a tough one. I mean, Giga has earned himself a right at a fight like this. I mean, the win streak that he's been on, the fights that he's been putting on, he's absolutely earned this moment. But that's just unfortunately for Calvin. That's where he is right now, man. There's nothing but killers up in the top of that division. And so, you can look at it. Maybe you could find some stylistic matches where you go, like, couldn't we find somebody that would wrestle with them a little bit more? I mean, can't we just have like a grappling match or something? But the reality is, man, that's just not what's up there at the top of the division. So I like it. Stylistically, I think it's going to be a fun fight. And, yes, if Calvin's taking this fight 3 months after that last one, I might say, ooh, what are you doing? But, you took a year away. You did all the right things in between. And so I think he feels confident that this is good for him.
Yeah, kind of wild that the 2022 schedule is already filling up. I mean, it sounds like we have our first pay-per-view headliner in Ngannou versus Gane. It sounds like we even maybe have our second one. Kambache reporting that the UFC is looking at February 12th for Adesanya and Whitaker. So interesting times. But even between now and the end of the year, John, we have, I think, 9 title fights, one of the interim variety, or something like that's 8. on these final 3 cards. So it's pretty crazy. The thing that I'm looking at, though, that I'm curious, the fighter of the year race. I want to get your take on this. To me, it's going to be a 2-man race. It's either going to be Kamaru Usman, if he defeats Colby Covington, would be 3 title defenses in the year. Obviously, unbelievable if he could beat Burns and Masvidal, and especially if he could finish Colby Covington. Or it's going to be Dustin Poirier, who would have 2 wins over Conor McGregor, 2 of the highest selling pay-per-views of all time, so much eyes, and then close it out with a title victory. Which way are you leaning? I mean, obviously that's a lot of, predicting, is this guy going to beat that guy? But if let's just say they both win in a similar fashion, a decision or something, it's a great fight. But who do you think would be the front runner there?
It's a tough one, right, man? Because I think I'd probably honestly lean towards Usman in terms of quality of schedule. I mean, I know no disrespect to Conor McGregor at this point, but, with the layoffs and where he stands at this point in his career, I don't know that if he is, that same level of absolute killer that Usman has been facing. But Poirier, man, the sentimental favorite as well, to go out and do what he did. And if he's able to beat Charles Oliveira and claim the title, I mean, what a year it would be for him. So, man, flip a coin on that one. It is going to come down to how these fights are won. But you think about the way Usman is winning fights as well, man. Unbelievable. Finishing Masvidal the way he did. Who saw that result coming? I mean, I don't think anybody predicted the fight was going to end like that. So 2-horse race, I think you're absolutely right. And then, to be honest, I don't think he'd be wrong in either selection. But for me, I think maybe give me Usman. The rematch. I mean, obviously Conor McGregor is an elite level athlete, but I don't know. Like, maybe you get a little less credit for beating the same guy twice. I think it's like, well, we just saw that. Now, we've seen Usman go out there and do it against 3 different high level guys. 3 entirely different types of fighters as well. He's done it against them all. So assuming that both guys are victorious in their last ones, I'd probably lean slightly towards Usman. But man, if you came back to me and told me you're voting for Poirier, I couldn't argue with that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably the most debated award when we get to the end of the year here, because I think it's going to be pretty interesting, especially if they can go out the win. But hey, Colby Covington or Charles Oliveira could make this decision for us and just win those fights. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously going to be kind of an incredible end of the year. You and I will be in New York for 268. It sounds like 269 will be in Las Vegas, right? Is that what you're hearing? I've seen a few people ask in the comments.
That's everything I've heard. Is it, unless something's changed, everything I've heard, the plan for months has been that's going to be at T-Mobile Arena. And by the way, hey, if Charles Oliveira wins, does he jump in that discussion all of a sudden? Especially if he finishes Dustin Poirier, does he jump in that discussion?
Hey, Brandon Moreno could be in there too if he beats Figueiredo again. There's a few guys, but obviously I think, I'm going to value the people with 3 fights over 2. Although Charles Oliveira did beat Tony Ferguson this year, right? That was this year?
Mm-hmm.
Was it? Yeah, I think that was earlier in the year. So, hey, he's right there as well. He'll be in the race. So I think that's going to be a hotly debated topic as we go down the stretch here. But we are down the stretch of this live chat, John. I know it's Friday night for you. You want to go spend some time with your family and stuff. I'll probably, get my Thanksgiving weekend celebrations off to a start here. But we will be back early tomorrow morning with on-site coverage. Yourself and our man producing in the back, Ken Hathaway, will be there at the UFC Apex for the 156th week in a row or something like that. I don't know how many it's been, but obviously we'll have all the coverage during the fights, after the fights, and then everyone can sit back and enjoy Fury versus Wilder. Any last words, John?
Does Dana even bother with those fight week tweets anymore? Remember, it used to be fight week all caps. Does he still do that?
Definitely not. He's in Maine right now, so playing with a flamethrower in his driveway. I saw that.
Is he really?
Right? Yeah, go check that out. It's legit a flamethrower. It looks insane. I would be terrified to be around it, but that's what he does. When he's out there.
It's fight week every week, man. It's fight week every week. But I dig it, man. It's been a blessing to be able to spend as much time at home as I have this year. As you said, I'm about to head out. I mean, look, Friday night we did the weigh-ins. We got the fights tomorrow, but once we get done here, I'm going to go to my son's soccer game in a minute. You know what I mean? Like, that's so much stuff that we miss when we're on the road. So it's a blessing to be here. But yeah, it's we're getting really comfortable with that UFC Apex, man, with the Contender Series. We're there 4 days a week, man. It's crazy. It's my second home. I'm ready for him to build that hotel so I can just throw a little cot over there in the back and grab some sleep. But yeah, full coverage of MMA Junkie. Like I said, maybe not the most star-studded card you've ever seen. Maybe we're not going to crown any new number 1 contenders, but knock on wood, I like some of the stylistic matchups. I think we're going to have a fun one tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everyone tuning in. We will do this a little bit more. And everyone have a great weekend and enjoy the fights.